Unless you've been living under a space rock, you are probably aware that the Star Wars Battlefront beta launched recently. Surprisingly, I've never played any of the previous Battlefront games despite being a huge fan of Star Wars. So I've decided to give this entry a go, and I found it to be a very enjoyable experience. With that in mind, here are 8 things you should know about Star Wars Battlefront. One of the key selling points of Star Wars Battlefront is the ability to play as some of the main characters that featured in the original movie trilogy. These include Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader and Boba Fett, with the first 2 included in the beta on the Walker Assault level. Prior to playing the beta, I assumed that the player would be able to play these characters either by selecting a hero or villain character class prior to starting a match, or unlocking the ability to play as a hero or villain by getting a high enough kill streak or score during a match. Instead, the only way to play as Luke or his father is to find a hero or villain token on the battlefield. These are randomly scattered across the environment, and with 40 players competing online, you have to be extremely lucky to find one of these tokens in order to be able to play as either character. I don't actually have a problem with this. The random factor means it won't just be the same dominant players playing as the hero or the villain. It also makes it all the more special when you do finally come across one of these tokens. In the time that I've spent with the beta, I've only been able to find a token once. I played as Luke Skywalker and it was a brilliant experience. Admittedly, I didn't really know what I was doing as I'd never played as him before, but I still had a lot of fun. Many people will argue that these characters are quite overpowered, but trust me, as soon as you become one of these characters, it's like painting a giant target on your back. Everyone gangs up on you in an attempt to take you out because they know how tough you are. This means that Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker won't be able to tear around the battlefield forever, which is a good thing. It's also an exhilarating experience fighting heroes or villains as standard troops. Whenever I've encountered Luke or Vader charging towards me, I began to panic. I know how powerful these guys are and that I could be dead at any second. I guess in a way this is how the stormtroopers and rebels would actually feel when faced with this threat. This makes it all the more special and satisfying when you do take them down, and I love their inclusion in the game. Star cards are special abilities which are unlocked via levelling up and brought with in-game credits. Don't worry, these credits have nothing to do with microtransactions, they are all earned in-game. The special abilities included in the Battlefront beta allow you to equip your character with a jetpack, be able to temporarily turn your standard rifle into a sniper rifle, and to be able to throw grenades, and much more. So far it just sounds like any other perk system featured in a standard shooter game, right? Well, the difference between equipping a grenade in Battlefront and equipping a grenade in Call of Duty, for example, is that in Battlefront the grenades, like all star cards, feature a cooldown system. This means that once the player uses their jetpack or their sniper rifle, after a certain period of time has passed the player can use them again, meaning that as long as you are alive, you can continue using your special abilities. Whereas in COD, for example, if you equip grenades, once you use all of them, that's it, you won't receive any more until you respawn. I personally much prefer the Star Wars approach. It encourages the player to stay alive and wait for their abilities to recharge, rather than killing themselves once they have run out of their special abilities in order just to receive them again. Think about it for a second, have you ever seen anyone reload in the Star Wars films? No? Well, now you know why. It's because they don't use ammo. Well, at least they don't in Battlefront anyway. Instead, all the guns in Battlefront overheat when fired too much. The player can avoid this from happening by ceasing fire when their gun begins to get too hot. Another way around this issue is to fire at your pleasure, then once the gun is overheated, a small yellow bar will appear on the semicircle around the aiming reticle. By pressing the square button at the right time, the player can cool their gun and continue firing. What I've described here is essentially a carbon copy of the active reload system that originated in Gears of War. This is not a new idea, but it works very well in Battlefront, and is a very clever risk-reward system. If you press the square button at the wrong time and miss the yellow zone, then your gun will actually take longer than normal to cool down. So, do you attempt to press square in order to get a quick reload, or do you just wait for the gun to cool down in case you miss it? After playing Battlefront, I don't really miss reloading at all. In fact, I wish that more games dropped ammo altogether for the weaponry and used this system instead. Despite this game generally receiving a lot of good press and reaction from fans and games journalists alike once it was announced, one thing that still sticks around like a bad fart is the lack of a single player campaign in the game. I have to say I do find it a bit disappointing, as I'm sure a Battlefront campaign set in the era of the original trilogy could have been amazing. Instead, its replacement is the missions mode. This mode features training, battles and survival, with only the latter being available in the beta. Survival is essentially horde mode, with the player having to survive 6 waves of increasingly difficult enemies. 15 waves are included in the full release. This kind of game mode isn't going to change the gaming world. It's been done many times before, but I still had a decent time with it, even if the enemy AI is a bit stupid. Hopefully, survival mode will prove to be more of a challenge on the harder difficulty settings, as normal mode is the only difficulty available in the beta and it's a bit of a breeze. A good inclusion is the ability to play this mode with a friend, either online or in split screen co-op. Playing with someone else makes this mode a lot more enjoyable, and I look forward to trying to survive all 15 waves in the full game with my younger brother. I know that the 2 other mission modes are not available at beta, but I still don't think this mode is an adequate replacement for a campaign. It's still a shame that there isn't one in Battlefront. Hopefully this doesn't deter too many people from purchasing this game. I've never taken part in a beta test before, but from what I've heard they are usually far from smooth experiences. Server problems and bugs seem to be commonplace. Cue my surprise then, when throughout my entire playthrough of the beta I've had no problems whatsoever. Not even the usual "you have been disconnected from EA servers" message that seems to blight most of EA's games made an appearance. Instead, the Battlefront beta has been extremely smooth to play, which bodes well for the game's November release date, and it's turned me from a skeptic to a believer in the Force. Let's be honest, apart from the prospect of playing as characters from the Star Wars franchise, I'm sure the one thing Battlefront players really want to do more than anything else is to jump into an X-Wing or a TIE fighter and begin dogfighting. Despite this, a lot of noise has been made by fans of the franchise about not being able to fly above the atmosphere and fight in this installment. As someone who hasn't played the previous Battlefront games, I don't really have an opinion on this, and I believe that the combat in this version of Battlefront is good enough that it doesn't really matter if you're fighting above the clouds or not. Although initially my impressions of the aerial combat were not so good. The controls do take some time to get used to. Accelerating and deaccelerating is mapped to the left analog stick and turning with the right. At first it all just felt a bit clunky, which made me avoid aerial combat for a good while altogether. After a couple of hours or so the controls finally clicked and I began dominating the skies and enjoying aerial combat immensely. The only problem I still have with the aerial combat aspect of Battlefront is the process of actually accessing the vehicles themselves. I imagine that DICE would use a similar system to that in Battlefield, whereby the player can enter ships that are located in the environment. Instead, Battlefront uses the same randomised token mechanics that are used to play as one of the heroes or villains. Players must find a ship token on the map and then call in air support. If the player doesn't call in air support within 15 seconds, they lose the ability to control that spaceship. The same goes for being killed before being able to trigger the support request. Personally, I'm not a fan of this and I would have preferred to enter ships that are actually located in the environment, but at least the aerial combat is fun to play. Simply put, this game looks incredible. There's a huge amount of detail present, both in the character models and the environment. It really captures the feel of the Star Wars universe. Small details such as witnessing rocks that are hit by blaster fire crumble in front of you, the little sparks that appear when laser blasts rebound off a lightsaber, and how amazing the animation for the thermal imploded detonation looks, truly make the game world feel more real. I don't usually focus on graphics in games, as I don't think that they are particularly important when compared to gameplay, but this game at times is truly breathtaking. Despite all my positive praise for the Battlefront beta, there are two problems with the game that are apparent to me. My first concern is to do with the spawning. I don't know whether it's because there are so many players fighting at one time, but there have been a lot of times when I have died, only to respawn a few feet from another player, only to then die again. It's not something that happens every time I die, but it does happen regularly enough during matches that it has become a bit of a frustration, and I wonder if DICE and EA have enough time to address this. But secondly, I feel like the Walker Assault mode is quite unbalanced, with the Imperials being the side that benefits from this. In all the matches I have played on this mode, I think I've only seen the Rebels win twice, and when I'm playing as the Rebels I often receive a lot more deaths and less kills than I do when playing as the Imperials. Again, I'm hoping that the developers look at this issue and see if there's anything that they can do. In addition, I hope that the other game modes in the full game don't also feel as unbalanced as this, only time will tell. So thank you very much for watching this video. Leave a like and subscribe if you like what you watched, and let me know in the comments below how your experience with the Star Wars Battlefront beta has been. Until next time, goodbye.